Gentlemen, thank you for coming. We're really pleased today to be able to host this seminar with Adam's paper. It's part of an effort by the Australian Centre for Cybersecurity to promote further research into the needs for cybersecurity education in Australia. So later this year in November, we're partnering with the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet for an international conference on realigning cybersecurity education in Australia. We'll have international speakers talking about other parts of the world, but the purpose is to present solid research papers on the state of cybersecurity education in Australia and where we might head. It's our hope that that'll be the first of 3 such conferences in the next 3 years. We've already had a good response to it. The government flagged in its April 2016 cybersecurity strategy the need for research on cybersecurity education, and it's a bit disappointing, I suppose one might say, that in the first review the area where the government itself admitted it had done least was in the area of research on its particular problems, including research on cybersecurity education. We're very alert to that. It's not an area in which this country has great strengths. So we have a number of people around the country who research particular aspects of cybersecurity education. We have many people who teach and deliver cybersecurity education. But in terms of the global community of scholars, we should note first of all that globally the situation is much the same. There are not loads of people studying cybersecurity education in universities around the world, and in fact the research that we've been doing here suggests that, say, within IT departments, something like only 5% of faculty are associated with cybersecurity, and we haven't done a count, but in terms of those people who know cybersecurity, the number of people who actively research cybersecurity education is very, very small. There's a couple of international conferences held every year on cybersecurity education, which produce quite remarkable and worthwhile studies. But if you look into the scholarly record for Australia, they're pretty slim pickings. We have people with good ideas. Australian scholars occasionally write articles on this, but to my knowledge we don't have a single researcher in an Australian university researching full-time the question of cybersecurity education. So we've got a long way to go, and we think that we can make some contribution here. It's great that Adam was willing to do this. This is part of his work with us for the new master's degree in cybersecurity strategy and diplomacy. The value of it, I think, is going to be quite enormous. So I was sitting in bed this morning at 5 a.m. writing the first lines of my chapter 3 for a new book on cybersecurity in China. And that chapter is on cybersecurity education research in China. And I had all sorts of ideas I'd started with, and I sort of started to put them down in the first few paragraphs. And then I realised that the framework that Adam has got in his paper is exactly what I needed to analyse the Chinese government's response to its research and education needs in cybersecurity. So the framework that Adam has developed in here is globally applicable, the Cybersecurity Education Framework. It's novel, and I think it'd be very valuable to take the conversation in Australia from broad generalities, which often end in discussions about cybersecurity awareness, to a deeper exploration of what different professional groups in Australia need or would benefit from in terms of formal education. So on that note, with an assertion that this is a high priority topic, we're going to be engaged with it. Thank you all for coming. Please stay engaged with us on it and help us improve and direct the research that we're doing. And I'll turn over now to Adam. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Craig. Hey, thank you everyone for attending. I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Ngunnawal people, and pay respect to their elders, past and present. Once again, thanks Greg for that lovely introduction, and thank you Keith, Dr. Keith Joyner as well for some of the input into this paper, and for everyone else who provided comments. So yeah, I'll get started. So, mastering the cybersecurity skills crisis, realigning, I'll move across so you can see it. Realigning educational outcomes to industry requirements. It's quite a long heading, but I think it's very valuable and very important wording as well. So I'm going to go through a few things today. So what is cybersecurity skills crisis, and why do we need to do anything? What is it? Why do we need to do anything? What's the problem? Why do universities need to change their model, the current model that they have? Does industry know what they require? That's a big question as well. Once again, as Greg mentioned, I'll go through the Cyberspace Education Framework. Generalist versus mission-specific master's program. So I'll go through what that means and the differences. Once again, key results and recommendations from the paper, and then areas for future research and any questions people may have. Just leave the questions till the end. It's probably just a bit easier, otherwise I might lose my place. So, what is cybersecurity skills crisis and why do we need to do anything? Many of you actually in this room probably do look at the cybersecurity news in the papers, online, things like that. There is a critical skills shortage worldwide. This is shown in every report that comes out, international, Australian, that I'll go through later on, and we can't fill the jobs. Some people say we have a negative employment rate in cybersecurity. There's too many jobs for the people. And it's a key policy issue globally. Nations are looking at this more and more. How do we address the skills crisis? What can we do? In this interconnected world, it's no longer I'm sitting here on an island. It's interconnected. Everything that happens in one place may affect people elsewhere and organisations elsewhere as well. So cybercrime, estimated at $1 trillion a year affects the globe. Could be more, could be less, but probably more. Organised crime and crime syndicates. I'm always amazed that people think that cybercrime is so big when we call organisations organised crime. They are companies. This is what they do. Their sheer purpose is to exploit people and make money. So that's one thing. Cyber espionage. Look, we see it more and more in many places. The election in the US with the Russian interference, things like that. And cyber disruption. So that's more things like Anonymous and places like that. So the costs and impacts are growing and the threats are becoming more and more sophisticated. I'll go through some of the things later on in the presentation about just who's involved in the industry and also who makes their way through. Look, in 20 years, there'll be 3 billion more internet users. So that's just users. It's not talking about, once again, the Internet of Things, devices accelerating. Look, I read something the other day, there'll be 120 billion devices connected. I was trying to work out how it could be so big with only 7 billion people in the world. But then I went through my house and I realised how many things that I have are connected. You know, you have your smartwatch, you have your iPhone or Samsung or whatever, you have your smart TV, you have your Apple TV, you have your Foxtel, everything is connected to the internet. The TV's connected to the internet, everything's a risk. And the power of artificial intelligence, smart cars, smart vehicles, smart fridges, everything's becoming smart. They should put an eye in front of everything like Apple does, and we'll know what it is, but the power of AI is definitely growing. So, look, there's a massive lack of cyber talent in Australia, and it's amongst the worst in the world. So the Australian Cybersecurity Growth Network, should have written it out, sector competitive plan said that Australian organisations struggle to find job-ready security staff, and they even have to pay high wages. So there's a lack of staff, it's driving up wages, but still you can't find, in certain areas, you can't find good staff. So why is that? Why is that? We have multiple universities teaching cybersecurity, we have multiple industry certifications that are around, but there's still a big job crisis, skills crisis. And once again, like I said before, like the scale and reach of malicious activity affecting Australian public and private sector organisations and individuals is unprecedented. So that's from the strategy that the Prime Minister released last year. So it's getting worse and worse. The first few slides sound a bit doldrum and doom and gloom, but it is painting a picture that is real, that is happening in Australia right now and globally. So one thing is that there's no silver bullet. Not one thing can solve the cybersecurity skills crisis. It won't be done with one magic course, it won't be done with one magic framework. Multiple things need to be done. So the field is complex and multidisciplinary. It's not just technical. Technical is important, but I'll go through later. It's only one of 5 themes that I have for cybersecurity education. And look, once again, the risks and threats are always evolving. They're getting worse, they're getting better, they're being smarter. It's happening. It incorporates multiple things. So like I said, multidisciplinary. So national security and defence, economics, sociology, political science, diplomacy, history, psychology. I could probably go on, management, things like that. So we really need to apply new ways of thinking, new understandings and strategies to respond in this new age, this new digital information age, the digital economy, like all these buzzwords that we have and we hear, but we are in this right now, and we do have to think of new ways to solving these problems. Traditional ways may not work and aren't working. So workplace requirements. So an academic view of workplace requirements, it's always good to have the academic view and then the industry view, just because they are quite different at times. But so a few things that I found. So depth over breadth. So some courses, and this is what I'd call a generalist course, would be breadth. It touches on many things. So the person gets the degree, walks out, but they're not really an expert in anything. They know a lot, but they're not an expert in any set field. Once again, cybersecurity isn't just a field. It's a kind of like engineering or medicine. There's multiple roles, multiple people underneath, and multiple skill sets required. Work integrated placements. I'll talk about that a lot in this presentation. I think it's a very important place to get the skill sets. Now, it's not an easy solution, and it's very hard to implement effectively. And the paper outlines that as well. But that and practical skill set development. So doing real world situations, scenarios, simulations, being able to put the theory into practice. Like you're the CISO of an organisation, something goes bad, what do you do? What do you do in that scenario? Do you think, what did my textbook say? Or do you go, oh yeah, okay, I did that in a simulation last week, here's what I did. And look, once again, the key requirement, the avoidance of an all-in-one approach. So one curriculum's not going to fix it, one thing's not going to fix it. It goes back to the silver bullet. It can't be fixed with one thing. It needs multiple things, multiple initiatives to be looked at. So once again, the key requirement is, especially for universities, is for courses to remain relevant by continually updating the teaching and learning methods and to ensure the content is in line with industry's new direction or requirements. Which seems very simple. Like, I say that out loud, I'm kind of like, well, that sounds obvious. A lot of organisations would assume that was the case, but it isn't always, and we do need to, once again, start going in a different direction, a new direction where we look at this. So workplace requirements. So common practice in other academic programs is to have practical skills acquired during work placement. So medicine, it's a perfect example. You do your study, you do your placement, you do your register or whatever it is, then you go on to a specialisation or you become a GP or whatever. And even at that point, once you are at that point of being a specialist, for example, a cardiologist, you still need to do ongoing learning to stay at that cardiologist level. So ongoing and those work placements, learning the skills. So you're not going to have a surgeon who's never worked on anyone before walk up and go, okay, what are we doing to Barry today? Just going to cut him open. Like, that's not going to work. And I'd be worried if I was Barry. Another big important part is knowledge, skills and abilities. I do go into this later on as well, but the KSAs and the levels acquired. So they're different at different levels. So you might be a network engineer, you might be a CISO. You need different knowledge, skills and abilities. Now they might be equal in importance, but they are different and that has to be acknowledged and viewed in it. So a few different stats. So globally, 77% think industry's current training and education programs are not fully preparing professionals for the workplace. The little picture on the side as well, this is from another report. Relevant degrees worth 20%. So that's the importance of, during hiring, 20%, 1/5. It's not great. So that, once again, it calls for academic programs to incorporate more practical learning. So the students are coming out with the skill sets that they require. Once again, similar to a plumber. So you do your apprenticeship, you do your TAFE course as well, then you finish, then you become a plumber. You acquire those skill sets, the knowledge, you also get the practical sets as well. Which aren't really being put in place currently in cybersecurity. So once again, the government, especially our government, but governments in general, is looking in part for universities to address this problem, but it's still in its infancy. So we're still catching up with this problem. And many people and bright minds in important roles come up with these ideas which will only solve part of the issue. So we do have to look at it in a broad context, that multifaceted, multidisciplinary nature of cybersecurity. So once again, like time spent on tasks for which the person is being prepared is critical for success. You think of a marathon runner. I'm not going to walk out tomorrow and run a marathon. I need to prepare for that marathon. I have to actually start running personally, and then move up. And that time spent in acquiring those skill sets, once again, like the plumber in the apprenticeship. Once again, medicine, it's a good example of how there's large components of workplace integrated learning. We definitely could learn something from the medical field or something like that, which shows those examples of different skill sets. Nurses aren't doing the same as a specialist. They learn different skills because the role's different. You need different training to do different roles. And this is true for cybersecurity. And performance measurements through real world scenarios are critical. I talk a lot about baselining and benchmarking later on, and it is important that you're getting those, you're measured against your skills, because when it comes to it in the workplace, you need to be able to do it. You need to be able to do whatever that task is, protect the network and things like that. So that's very important. So that comes to what I call the Cyberspace Education Framework. Now I chose the word cyberspace because it's not just about security. Security is one part of it, but I did want to incorporate everything to do with cyber in the digital economy, in the information age. So it's a little bit hard to see, so apologies for the colours. But education type, what's the type of education which is being undertaken? Level of expertise, the field of education, so 5 fields which I'll go through in a moment. The purpose, why are you doing it? And application, how are you going to apply it? How are you going to apply that education that you've learnt? So, education type. So an important thing to do with cybersecurity, I think, is that the education undertaken is not defined by the traditional sequence of education. It's not a student doing primary school, senior school, higher education, job, or vet course, job. It can vary, and a lot of the people who have skills, as you can see, are self-taught. A large percentage of people in cybersecurity who do bug hunting and things like that are self-taught. So you also have on-the-job training, once again, primary school, secondary, vocational, higher ed. Industry certifications, once again, plays an important part in cybersecurity. Adult education and university of the third age. So you can teach a dog, old dog new tricks in the university of the third age. Level of expertise. I kept it pretty simple. Now you can use these 5 and put it against some other industry levels of expertise, which goes deep into the layers. But for the sake of the framework and to keep it simple, I went with 5. So basic, intermediate, advanced expert, advanced expert. An advanced expert would be, for example, Dr. Gideon from here. So he's not here at the moment, but he's a cyber guardian. So there's only 37 of those in the world who have that certification of cyber guardian. That would be an advanced expert. The people who created Stuxnet, for example, the worm in 2007, that would also be counted as an advanced expert. Basic could be university education, primary school education, things like that. So it is broad, but some of the education is quite basic, and once again goes through. So in the paper, I probably looked at the degrees that I looked at were probably basic to intermediate. They could become advanced, and some of the options that I show are advanced and expert levels as well, which I'll talk about in a bit moment. So a fundamental point is that there's multidisciplinary fields and purposes. So having experience, technical expertise is the same as, say, international relations. So would say in an Australian context, Alastair McGibbon, as the Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister in Cybersecurity, is just as much as an expert as Tobias Feakin as the Cyber Affairs Ambassador. Or someone in a technical role as well. So they are counted as all equal in the expertise. So once you're at that level, it's counted as equal, even though they're different roles. Field of education. Now I have simplified this, so you could have many fields that it touches on, but I felt that these 5 were probably the easiest to try and touch on the key areas. So political, once again, we've talked about political, the Russian election, US elections, Russia, China, North Korea. Lots of plays in that space. Social, legal, technical obviously is only one of the 5, as I mentioned, so not everything is technical. And people. You need a person to click on an email and open that phishing email to cause want to cry. It's amazing. So, and once again, purpose. So what's the reason or the purpose or mission set, for example, for you doing this education? So is it for espionage? Is it for protection of critical infrastructure? Is it for protection of children? Once again, they're all very, very different, but just as important and are counted. Legislative development, home user security. So once again, goes back to the student of the third age studying to make sure that they're safe so they're not getting ripped off and all their superannuation money goes missing through a fraud through Nigeria. Application, why? How are you going to do it? Once you know, how are you going to apply it? So is it an individual action? Once again, going back to that example of the older person. Is it as a team member? Is it a team leader? So in an organisation, you're leading a team of people, mid-level, executive level, so CSIO, C-suite. National policy leadership, so government. What kind of area or where do you fit? So are you trying to do a master's to become that mid-level? Are you doing an industry certification to become a team leader? Things like that. So that's how it all fits in together and how they apply it. So in the example that I used in the paper for the generalist university degrees, you could see that it's higher education, basic to intermediate. They're not quite getting to the advanced yet. It touches on the political, social, the technical aspects. It's a generalist program, so once again, multiple things. So it does touch on multiple levels for the purpose and individual action team member. So that's how, like, it's a simple way of displaying an easy thing. So you might have a look at that. The government might want to have a look at schools and what they do in cyber safety and things like that. And you can quickly use the matrix to create different pictures of different areas of expertise without having to do a large amount of work. And it's quite a simple picture, so you can see exactly what you're looking at. At least I think it's simple. So applying it, once again, it's not expected that all possible elements or linkages in the matrix would be meaningful. So if we looked at example, primary school, advanced to advanced expert, technical area, enterprise cybersecurity and individual action, you probably wouldn't think that was applicable. Though I did read an article the other week about a boy in the UK who's 10, so he's in primary school. He works for a bug hunting company in the US and earns about $500,000 a year as a 10-year-old. So I would say he's probably advanced to the advanced expert level. Obviously he's technical, doing penetration testing on enterprise systems, and he did it by himself because he was interested. The boy's 10. Like, cybersecurity is an amazing area when you have a 10-year-old who has more expertise than a large amount of people in the world. You don't get that very often. So it also allows us to situate existing programs and align them with specialisations, mission sets, roles and outcomes. So you can use it to baseline current programs. So you have a look at current programs, how they fit in and how you want it to be in the future. How can you realign these pieces so that it's effective? And once again, this is a very different approach to, say, core competencies, which has been a focus of much of public policy, so getting those core competencies for people. It's important work, but I don't think it's not a silver bullet. Once again, there is no silver bullet. As I said, there's going to have to be a lot of mechanisms working together to ensure that we're going to be successful in cybersecurity education. So I did some research, so the analysis. So I looked at viewpoints from students at UNSW. So thank you to any of the students here if they are who filled in the survey. Employers, I looked at industry surveys. And once again, I looked at four universities offering, so 3 Australian and 1 international. So I looked at Edith Cowan, Deakin University, UNSW, explicitly at their Masters of Cybersecurity. So UNSW teaches a lot of different ones, but it's the course's Master of Cybersecurity. So I wanted to see what that was and how it aligned to these work roles. I also looked at the NIST work roles, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US have a framework. It's just been updated recently in this month for knowledge, skills and abilities to educational outputs. So what I did was look at the work roles that are required. So it might say network knowledge in X, and so you'd look at the what the course taught and see if it actually teaches that. And I used that against the top 5 skills crisis work roles identified by the Australian Information Security Association survey, which I go through a little bit later as well. I then compared the Australian generalist degrees against what's called the Master of Science in Computer Forensics and Cybercrime Investigation at the University College Dublin. So that's a course which is taught for law enforcement officers only. Now, they have people from 67 nations worldwide doing that course. Governments pay for their people to do it, law enforcement agencies pay people to do it. It's a very successful degree, and it shows how a mission-specific program can address a requirement. So 67 nations worldwide do one course in Dublin, of all places. It's online, a large amount of it, but you do go through workshops internationally. And I talked to them as well, and they had some interesting views. So, and that really shows that, mission-specific programs will be adequate. So I want to just show you some of the stats that we got from the survey. So 22% response rate, not too bad. 30% with defence, 38% private industry, 24% state or federal public service. 95% believe it was good, 92.5%, sorry, believe that they could use the KSAs in the future, benefit. 40% did not work in the cybersecurity industry. I'll get back to that number a little bit later because that is an issue. The yellow one I apologise for, I can't actually read that. 56% were undertaking courses to gain a new role. So over half of the students were trying to get a new role. That's why they were studying this. And look, and funny enough, 15% were actually just interested in the topic. They didn't want a new job. They didn't want anything. They were just interested in doing the masters and learning about cybersecurity, which is great. Good on them. The yellow once again, sorry. 65% said work placements would be useful. 88% said that knowledge and skill sets they considered useful. 87.5%, I'll read this one out if you can't read it, at least if I can't read it on that screen. Agreed simulations undertaken had strengthened their knowledge and skill sets for future career ambition. So when you look at the 65% said that work placements would be good, 87.5% of the people who had done simulations said it was really good. You can start to see that students benefited, and that's just their opinion, it's not the workplaces. The workplace is saying we need it, they're benefiting from it, so why aren't we doing it? More of it. Interesting, and for the government as well, 34% said they'd undertake a PhD. It's also quite positive. It's a pretty big number. I was surprised that many would want to do postgraduate research. So industry survey. So that's the student view. Now we move on to the industry view. So what does industry say? So I looked at two reports specifically. The ISACA report, which is a global report, and then I looked at the Australian Information Security Association, Australian Information Security Association report as well from 2017. So once again, 55% candidate qualification. So hands-on experience is the most important thing. And in stark contrast, realistically, formal education was counted the same as personal endorsement. So going back to Barry, who was on the surgery bed, he rings up someone else and goes, oh, you know what, this guy knows a bit, he's pretty good, is equivalent to someone undertaking formal education according to industry, which is shocking. Like, that's not a good sign, and more has to be done. And that's, once again, supported in Australia as well. So current academic qualifications didn't adequately prepare students for the workforce. So something has to be done, because these reports are quite damning, especially when you go back to that 40% of students in the survey aren't working in cybersecurity at the moment. They're probably not going to get a job, or they're going to struggle to get a job in cybersecurity, even though they've studied it and they've done a high quality program. So just looking at this, so this is the comparison of the work roles at the top. So system security analyst, systems architect, cyber defence incident investigator, forensic analyst, technical security consultant. They're the work roles. They're the top 5 that Australia needs right now, according to the ISA report. So overall, if you look at the red circle, overall the alignment was 51% for the educational outcomes to industry requirements in those roles. That's not great. An average of 51%, you just passed. So there is some good news though. Once again, these were only Masters of Cybersecurity, the generalist roles. UNSW Canberra for the Cyber Defence Incident Investigator got 77%, ECU 67%. So that's pretty good. That's not too bad. Now, once again, in contrast, and it's not on the slide, to the UCD Masters that they offered that I mentioned earlier, they had a 97% alignment with the forensic analyst role. 97%. And the only reason it wasn't higher is because they explicitly asked for some bug words in there that weren't explicitly outlined in the course material. So they might have learnt it, it just didn't say the word. So 97% though, which is why it's so successful. So you can see pretty starkly that we're not really aligning to what industry needs in cybersecurity education, at least at the master's level. So once again, current initiatives that are being undertaken. So many governments are trying to initiate a single curriculum. A single curriculum, once again, it probably won't work and it'll fall short because cybersecurity is multidisciplinary. Multiple streams, multiple areas. Like, you're just getting it bigger and bigger and bigger. Like if they are able to do that, then that's perfect and cover all the aspects, all the requirements and everything else. That would be good, but it's going to be a slow process. Once again, you have to look at the purpose of why we're doing it. Career paths is another big area. The government is looking at career paths, but where are you going to get to? So I've also read that certain people in certain technical roles, they're so technical, so distinct that they can't go anywhere. They're just trapped. So they've been in the role for 5 years. They want to move on, but they can't because it's such a defined role that they do that they can't really go anywhere else. It's a junior again. So they may as well just stay in that role. And that's an issue. And once again, the education level is required. So masters, bachelor, industry certifications, things like that. They're the current initiatives. So key results and recommendations. So a few things here. So it would be beneficial for universities to partner with government and industry more to establish career paths for students. I'm not saying that they are doing it at the moment. Obviously, ANU work with government, we work with defence. Macquarie University and La Trobe University work with with Optus. So they do programs there. So things are starting to happen. There's linkages out there, industry and government starting to work with the universities. So career paths, practical and work integrated learning opportunities. Like we have to keep pushing that. And how do we do that? How can we get a master's student to do a practical level if they're working full time or things like that? Like there has to be more options. We have to look at it once again in new directions. And once again, so a key requirement of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre of Excellence. Sorry, I got the acronym wrong. So the key goal of that, so that's an initiative of the strategy run by the Department of Education and Training, is to increase the number of highly skilled postgraduates with the job-ready skills needed to work in Australian business and government to tackle emerging cybersecurity challenges. And if you look at that graph back ago, so if we look at the picture there, are we making them job-ready? Are we meeting that need of the requirement? Now, obviously, that's only those two schools, so that's Edith Cowan and Melbourne University were given that Centres of Excellence, but at the moment, we're not reaching those goals at all. So we do need to work. The government's initiative is to create these job-ready people. We need to look back at the programs they're teaching. So once again, the framework provides a valuable tool for analysis of education and training programs. Thanks, Greg, for saying that it was positive at 5 a.m. like to the China market. It's good to hear. See, great ideas happen in the morning. I'm not a morning person, but it's good that you had it at 5 a.m. So the results demonstrate the gap between university offerings and industry requirements. I hope that's been made clear in some of the pictures and things like that. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but there is a gap and we do need to change. We really need to align program streams to industry vacancies. So like we had those top five areas that we need people in, but why aren't we creating courses to put people in there straight away? Once again, I just thought that was kind of obvious. If you have all these skills, you talk to them and go, what do you need? Because you're going to have more students come in. They might even send you people. You're getting money. They're getting the expertise. Everyone wins. Once again, practical skill set application development is vital for technical programs. So technical streams, practical skill sets. So you need to be able to do what you've learnt in a practical workplace. So, if you're a plumber, once again, you need to know how to change pipes or whatever plumbers do. I'm not a plumber, I hire them. But once again, it's an easy example to show that they train and they get the skill sets. And once again, look, universities working with industry to provide internships, work placements would be a valuable promotion for universities as well. So, a university could team up with Telstra, could team up with the government, could team up with anyone to do internships, cadetships, traineeships, apprenticeships, scholarships, anything with the word ship on the end, we could introduce and promote. So the university gets a big name, they join up with Telstra or whoever, they do these things, and it's beneficial once again to both. So applying the research, and once again, thank you to Dr. Keith Joyner, who is here. So here's like applying the research. So this is just an example of what we could do. Now in the paper, it's extended. It's just a bit messy for a slide, but here's something that you could do for, to say, the defence realm. So in the paper, we say defence, government and industry. So you have a 2-year program. Here's some of the courses you do. Cyber law. Now cyber law is going to get more and more important as ethics and acquisitions and mergers and cyber crime and everything else starts becoming more and more important. How are you going to charge someone for a crime if you don't know the law behind it and how to acquire that evidence for that, for example? Cyber acquisition governance, going through semester 2, a lot of network stuff, defensive and offensive techniques. So learning those techniques, but at the same time, you need to understand the law, the terms of battle, warfare, things like that. And that all comes in with industry partners in these courses. And once again, that's outlined in the paper. It was a bit messy for a slide. And in the second year, you do a practical project. So you've got 2 years intensive programs with industry supported, practical at the end. You're getting those skill sets. If we, for example, we could fund the government, not we, not me, the government, Australian government could fund, for example, or defence, whoever wants to, 25 students in each program. So defence, government, industry. So industry might be critical infrastructure, for example. So obviously the course would be different, but critical infrastructure is a big risk for Australia being so big and diverse in the rural areas. So 25 students, 75 total. In 3 years, you've got 225 students who are experts. So they might get a master's cyber degree at the end. They might, because we've partnered with an institution, they might get an accreditation and a certificate, industry certificate. And you've done 2 years of study and you've got that practical experience. So that's cutting down that 5-year expectation of industry. So every job role, if you look at cybersecurity, has a magic number of 5 years experience. I don't know why, who made up the 5 years experience, but everyone needs 5 years experience to do any role. If you're walking into Macca's, have you got 5 years experience? Well, no. But yeah, so that would stop that and that would help that because you've got that practical experience, that 1-year program, and it's funded by the government. So it's not, you could leave your job, you could do it as part of defence, as part of an APS employee. It's harder for private sector, but it can be doable. Once again, people need to be flexible. We're in an age where banks are talking to each other about cyber threats, telcos are talking to each other about cyber threats. In the past, a bank wouldn't tell to another bank for love nor money, ironically. Why would you? Because you have your secrets. But now they want to know because if something attacks them, they want to tell the other guys because it's going to protect Australia. It's in the interest of Australia, it's not just a me mentality anymore, it's an us mentality, which has to come through more and more. And once again, we could spawn replication of these programs in Australia and abroad. So we do have an opportunity to be a world leader in cybersecurity education. It's in its infancy. People around the world are grappling with this. The UK are grappling with it. The US are grappling with it. They're all doing different things, but we can be a leader in this area if we get it right. So areas for future research. So Australian cybersecurity industry, what they want and require from institutions. Let's once again do another study, another survey, what do you need? But let's really actually look at it and use it. Not just have a report and go, the industry report, the university goes, oh, we don't really agree with the industry report, and the university will do a study and the industry go, oh, we don't really agree with the university. Well, let's work towards actually filling the gaps. Educational outcomes and industry work roles. We need to map those to the broad requirements of skills and education in the crisis. So how can we map them? So a lot of work once again is being done in this, but more needs to be done to map the work roles, the skills, the career paths, to have a clear indication of what can be done and what needs to be done to fill those gaps. And baselines and benchmarks. We need to set up benchmarks and baselines because otherwise programs that we are funding or undertaking or teaching, we're not going to know if they're working or not. We might, for example, Centres of Excellence, the government might put in $900,000 this year, extended, but they might not have any outcomes. They don't know because they're not actually doing it at the moment. They're not tracking it. The big criticism of the strategy review for this year was that there's no accurate baselines. They don't benchmark it against anything. They just say that the program's going okay with smiley faces and ticks. Like, it's not actually accurate. You need to have actual data. Like if you did that in an organisation, you have KPIs. Like otherwise, you're not getting paid. You're getting fired, or you're not getting your raise. We need to do more of that. We need to track these things to show and to also to know the relevance of the programs. Are we meeting industry requirements? Are we going with where we're meant to go, or have we gone in the wrong direction and just go, look, this program doesn't work. We have to change. And I think in cybersecurity, we have to try new things and go, look, it's not working. Let's change it slightly and go from there. Because it's not going to harm us if we try something. It will harm us if we spend, $4 million on a program, and at the end of it, everyone goes, well, we don't have any actual workers in cybersecurity. So all the people who went through the course perhaps are now working for consultancy companies doing finance, not cybersecurity. So another question for future research is, should there be a hybrid model for cybersecurity education? So a cybersecurity college, for example, which looks at teachers, higher education, vocational education, industry certifications, all in one to fill that gap. So that's, is it possible? Can it be done here? Can it be done for defence? As part of the ANU program, possibilities. So people could want to research that. Once again, traineeships, cadetships, apprenticeships, scholarships, or similar, just so the students gain that experience in undergraduate and masters. Obviously, this paper looked at the masters level, but at all levels, that would be beneficial. So more needs to be done, and I'm not saying any of this is easy, and disruption is hard to implement. Universities, public service, big organisations do work at slow rates at times, but the world's not going to stop for us. The hacker down the street, that 10-year-old that I used in that example before, he's kind of like a Star Wars character who might go down the dark side, or he could come to the light. You don't know, he's 10. We need to work this stuff out so people like that with that talent aren't exploiting nation states in 5 years' time or 3 months' time. So student experiences are positive. Alignment of courses offered with the work roles was low. So students still enjoy the courses. So the teaching at the institutions is good. It's just that it's not relevant to industry in some way. So it is a funny kind of thing to look at. Mission specific. So the reason for doing it, you need to have, is it national security? Is it espionage? Those kind of things. Let's have a look at those types of courses to fill the key gaps. And once again, the focus enables stakeholders to establish educational programs and policies relevant to the requirement. Seems pretty obvious, like if you're trying to do something, let's make sure that they're relevant to the areas we're trying to address, not just a big, broad area. And once again, the framework provides a model to view education holistically in the public policy context, so hopefully you got that through. And evaluation, once again, ongoing evaluation is required to ensure that existing programs, you see the strengths and weaknesses of all of them. Thank you very much. So questions? How about in boy? Feel free to put your hand up if you want. No.
Thanks for the presentation. You were talking about your test data from the university as well as the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, have you ever thought about taking government agencies on board? Particularly when you talk about industry, transfer and other places, they would act differently to the government agencies because they have different perception of cybersecurity.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That could actually be to develop your framework sometimes. And, have you ever thought about that as well? Have you ever, the government agencies? So
involving them in the framework? I'd like to, so obviously it's just a discussion paper, so I'd like to discuss it with them. So that was about it. Yes?
Tom Williams from ANU. We've got all sorts of defence people embedded at the moment on all sorts of things. But if you want a practical program, you give me the specs, I can design it. But do we have anybody in Australia to give us the specs? So for the engineering courses, we have Engineers Australia. For computing courses, we have the Australian Computer Society. Is there a industry-connected professional body for the educators to turn to work out what they should be teaching and how they should be teaching?
Not Greg.
The small bit of help I could give on that is that there's an organisation called the Australian Intelligence Professionals Association or something similar, which has people who've got professional background in spooky things and in some cases the ASD type things. It wouldn't really have the same standing as, say, Engineers Australia, but it's not a bad sort of departure point. We're going through the problem here, trying to grant some new specifications for our cyber range. We're comparing that with what other people are doing globally. There's a clear difference between what the Americans can achieve and what most other countries can achieve. And one of the dilemmas we face, especially in the national security space, but in other spaces as well, is how do we translate the high value, in-depth American experiences to an education and training format geographically located in Australia, including the designing of specs. So we're having a big conference at the end of November. We'll have a couple of work streams on cyber ranges and simulations. We don't really have too many people in Australia in universities working on cyber attack simulations of medium complexity. So if you want to have a cybersecurity exercise in Australia, medium complexity, things like involving attacks on critical infrastructure and some cyber conflict, cyber war type elements, nobody is there yet, in my view. There may be some in the depths of defence. But this whole question of cyber ranges, cyber simulations, and designing the specs for even formal education is something we have to find a new solution to. It's probably a cooperative one. Sorry to intrude, but...
No, so what Greg said. Yeah, no, like the ACS I know does some work. The Growth Centre might be looking at that, possibly. Some kind of industry body similar, which, yeah, it would be useful. And I think that's part of the issue is because it's so new and so broad, how do you put it all into one organisation? But once again, engineering, biological, mechanical, civil, I'm guessing they work on all of them.
Can I just make a quick comment on that? Sorry. That's why Adam's mention of the ACCS exercise on core competencies is interesting, because we went to, I think the country arrived at this point where the government asked ACS to give them something on core competencies because that's the limit of what they can deliver. Because without a dedicated research program to do all of this stuff that Adam's proposing, they can't go anywhere else. So the government's more or less locked itself into a very partial low-level solution by saying, well, let's reorient cybersecurity education around what the ACS says are our core competencies. Sorry.
No.
Adam.
Nope, sorry.
I'm Diane Miller from the US. I have that funny accent. I applaud where you are now in the United States. I think I started in this around 2009. And at the university level, one thing that we realized is what you realized, it is not a one-size-fits-all. And so one thing that we've been working with at a national level is addressing the various industry needs. In the United States, industry drove a lot of that. And I worked for Northrop Grumman, and we were one of the key drivers in the whole cybersecurity education. And we just started calling it cyber because it could be full spectrum. And what we found was at the university level, especially at the Bachelor of Science kind of level, we needed very, very different programs because the cyber field is such a diverse field in your day-to-day activities. And so we helped develop a Bachelor of Science in Cyber Engineering, which would address integrated engineering of all of the disciplines of engineering with elements of cyber within them, as well as a standalone cyber degree. There are other universities that focus on critical infrastructure, industrial control systems. There are other universities that focus more on cyber intelligence. So one thing I very much like in the United States is that a child who is very good at secure software development or likes software development has a number of choices of where they would go pursue that education. Someone who is much more into architecture and design has some place or a variety of universities they can go to. So as much as we appreciate the universities and the fact that we have a great diversity, one thing that we've been finding is more critical that we've been focusing on recently is the pathways from secondary schools to what we call community colleges, which would be a 2-year academic program. And there they can have a terminal degree and then go into the workplace, or have a continuing degree that would go into a 4-year university situation. Because as a member of industry, no degree is okay. And so we're grappling with the fact that there are a lot of jobs out there that do not require any university degrees. And I was working with the UK government in designing their national cyber education and workforce structure.
And they were focusing on PhDs, and I bring it back a little lower, bring it back. And so I finally had to tell them, we teach cyber to 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so we have a very comprehensive model for cyber education and training in workforce. And the reason that we're out here now is because we also run a program called Cyber Patriot in the United States, which is also in the UK, called Cyber Centurion, and it's in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But it is a comprehensive cyber education and training program from 5 years old to 18 years, including national competitions. So perhaps there's a way to weave those kinds of informal activities within your vision.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Really, yeah, it looks like the US is way more advanced than Australia in a lot of those places, especially the kids' age.
Adam, I would say I'm Michael from the Cybersecurity Grant Network. We're looking at that vocational level of education very much as one of the key missing spots in Australia because, like you say, there are so many positions out there that can be filled by people without college degrees. And we have a couple of star performers so far that we've highlighted. One in Canberra, the CIT here, Canberra Institute of TAFE, and Fox Hill TAFE as well. Both of those are doing excellent work in producing cybersecurity graduates at the certificate and diploma level. And those people are, in our opinion anyway, what we know about the market and the industry is that there's plenty of jobs out there for people at that level. And people shouldn't be focusing on getting 3 or 4 year, even 3 or 4 year degree computer science graduates, let alone PhDs, as their minimum standard for these jobs and advertising. The 5-year experience thing doesn't help either. But it's part of the culture change in employers as well about the kinds of people they can use to fill those positions.
Yeah, I was looking at, oh, sorry, go. I was just going to say, in the work roles, so I was looking at seek.com, so that's a recruitment agency in Australia, could be broad. And one of the roles, it was just, you needed 3 years business management, you needed 5 years cybersecurity, you needed 3 years database management. And it was just like, no one in Australia is going to be able to fill this role because it's literally like 15 years of experience and half the things haven't existed for that long. So, industry, they do require some unicorns in a way. I was talking to, once again, Hayes Recruitment, so they're a recruitment agency in Canberra. I'm not sure how big they are abroad. But they were saying part of their role is to talk down the recruiter for their experience and the requirements because it's so once again, they're obsessed with 5 years, they're obsessed with certain things and certifications that aren't even applicable to the role that they're doing. So they might ask for an industry certification. You're like, well, do they need it? No, they don't actually need it at all. I just put it in there because I went on Seek and I found that other people had it on there, and so I put it on there. And so one of their role is really explaining to industry some of the requirements because the HR area might not understand cyber as well. Or the people writing the job descriptions might not know cyber very well and vice versa. So it's an interesting thing with the...
On that, the PwC Global Report, which just came out, had a figure for how many people are involved in the cyber recruitment process from the cyber operational areas and how many people from the HR department do it. And what's happening, according to the figures, I forget the exact figure, there's a very large proportion, not bigger than 50%, where the bulk of the recruitment for cyber specialists is actually put into the hands of HR specialists and not cyber operations people. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you for your remarks. I'm Michael and I work with Gabe Rockman's office on cybersecurity policy. So I just had a number of questions. Firstly, how would the secondment of people directly from the private sector into universities to directly train people, is that a possibility? I'm across the ANU, and most of my lecturers are directly seconded from various departments, which is obviously quite effective in getting you sort of industry ready and engaged with people who eventually becoming bosses. So is that something you could do from the private sector into the universities? Secondly, ASD is opening a centre at ANU which will train a lot of their cyber people before they get their clearances. So how effective do you think that sort of initiative will be in bringing up critical infrastructure stuff, cyber attack simulations, and those sort of areas. In a 3-year degree, there's a lot of change in cybersecurity stuff over the course of 3 years. So the stuff you learn in your first year is largely not relevant in your third year. So how do you think you could change those degrees fast enough to make sure that they remain relevant and then obviously directly engaged through industry?
Thank you. What was the first one? Sorry, I'll go through. I remember the last one. I can. It's the first. Industry secondments. Yep. So in the paper, sorry, and we did touch on it briefly on the example that Keith had, which is having an industry chair. So each unit is taught by 2 industry chairs. I think the secondments of industry people is a really good idea. Once again, it's easy to say verbally, but getting it actually to happen where an industry organisation has to give up one of their staff members either full-time or part-time or something is difficult, but it would be very beneficial. I don't think anyone would complain that industry would be working in the institutions. There may be a bit of backlash between the way that the university works and the way that the industry person is used to working, like government and private industry. But yeah, I think it would be very beneficial for that to happen. What was the second one again, sorry?
ASD.
Oh, yep. Once again, I think that's really good. I think a key thing for national security and the roles where you need clearances is having some kind of 18 months. So normally it takes about 18 months to get a security clearance. You'd be looking at possibly setting up some kind of program for 18 months where you can just learn general cybersecurity things, and then you get into the scary stuff where you're in a dark room at ANU working doing the ASD research. From my knowledge, I think it is only the research that ASD is doing is not public. It will be all NV2 contained, so we probably won't see the light of day of the research. We'll just assume it's going to be very effective and useful. But yeah, definitely that 18 months, there is a big area, and there's a ripe area for picking, is that 18 months where people, graduates from ADFA, wherever, are looking to get that security clearance and they can learn cybersecurity. So yeah, non-classified information, because once again, you can learn about ethics and law and networks. You don't need to necessarily have to have clearance levels for that.
Can I add a footnote on the commercial involvement courses?
Fine.
So we're actively investigating that. We've had a conversation with a couple of leading corporations, and we'd like to have more conversations with Northrop Grumman. Tony Marcetto is on our steering committee, so that would be really great. And one of the motivators for that, in our case, is that the knowledge level of the material that we're teaching is, as Adam said, intermediate to basic. Everyone who works in the government and the Defence Force who comes to us to do a master's program are dealing with situations which are really more in the expert to advanced expert type situation. And you get no whisper. I don't want to be too critical of at my own university. I think we do a great job. But you almost get no whisper of anything practical in our courses that relate to those problems. And the only way we'll be able to deliver that is we get the top level people from the top level corporations who have an experience in delivering education in that advanced area. And we've got high levels of interest. We just have to find the right formula which satisfies them. We're very close. I won't say that our contacts are at an advanced stage. We're establishing corporations who are interested. We've got Keith and I have talked about how we can frame that up. And the proposal that Keith and Adam worked up together is one that we really want to take further.
I'm Matt from Jacobs, Mr. in Defence, and I guess we're in maybe a similar situation to Northrop as well. So we're an American company originally. We have many labs in the US, and we're looking at extending our labs into Australia. Obviously, those labs are tied to US defence works, which is problematic, and sort of the tools that we use there are, it's complicated, and with ITAR and everything else to bring those tools out here. But even the tools that are not restricted by defence, then we would say that they're in our commercial best interest, because I guess there is sort of a collaboration with defence in the US and in Australia, but ultimately we are a firm that is selling our tools and expertise to defence. So it's going to be difficult, I guess, with the ASD sort of interaction there, because even you can't just bank on that defence will have the brightest minds, because it probably won't, and industry will probably have the brightest minds because it has the deepest pockets to acquire that talent very early on. So a lot of that talent will be sort of caught up and create software and programs and protocols that may never sort of come to the public sort of surface. So I guess how that interaction is sort of managed is a very complex one that we're sort of looking at the moment. And A&U will be right in the middle of that, sort of as that progresses.
I might just pick up on that. So Scott Neal from the Department of Education and Training. It's been quite interesting when you both your framework in terms of setting out a way of coming into this question. And then the discussion today about the interaction between what's the role of industry and what's the role of an educational institution. And how does profit drivers kind of really blur the lines between the two and how you build capability. I'm not sure if you look at this as part of your research and particularly looking at different models of delivery. And they might have touched on vocational education as one particular option, which is kind of interesting. But it's how, at what point do you kind of bring industry into this sort of stuff? We know that they're not going to share the kind of commercial information that is the leading edge stuff that gives the competitive advantage. But perhaps the iteration a year before or even 2 years before is still a long way from where the academic kind of research is at this stage. And any insights that you might have gained from your research as to how to kind of help both parties see the value in that kind of proposition?
I think industry, like I mentioned, with like the banks all working together and the telcos. I know that I was at a talk the other week with the Telstra CSIO, and they have like a little group, CSISO group, where they all get together and they all talk about these issues and how they can, and they really do want to engage with the industry. But yeah, the commercial and confidence things and the money driving, it is hard. But I guess they're coming to the point once again where banks are sharing with banks and telcos are sharing with telcos, is that we need to work together to get this issue fixed. Otherwise, we're going to fail badly and we're going to struggle as a nation in not all ways, but in quite many ways, and globally as well. So I think industry is definitely waking up to the point that they need to work with government, they need to work with providers to implement, because they need the staff. And it's not easy to always bring in a staff and teach them yourselves. So not everyone's going to be willing to do that, and small to medium-sized businesses don't have the budget to do that. So they need, and that's a thing that I didn't touch on at all, is how do they get staff? How do they keep staff in those situations? And that's a massive issue that needs to be addressed, which the paper didn't look at to a degree, but is a major issue. So they're moving towards it, and so I guess it's for government and high-powered organisations and forums and things to get together and try to work out in a constructive, not just a talk fest, but a constructive thing, and have some actual mechanisms to address those. And then going back to your third, what was the third one? Did we touch on that?
So about updating degrees, so about the course of the degree, it seems to become less.
Oh, the information, yeah. No, I heard that in my degrees when I did my bachelor. Oh no, he's just standing up, stretching. Sorry.
Just with that third question, if we roll back on the slides to our example, I was waiting for you to remember he had a third question. Yeah, that practicum that you see at the bottom there, I'm getting some experience at the moment of teaching something completely different, which is test techniques in a defence environment. And by giving the assessment out to the students, and they have to choose their topic and then do the analysis using the new skills and bring that back. So if you preserve a proportion of all of those first year semester subjects and say you have to implement that and show the use of those skills in the practicum, that feeds back to the lecturer. Because when you go back and you teach next year, you're going, oh, and here's an example, right? You have to always be careful, of course, but here's an example that I can show you. And if your degree is out of kilter at all, the timeline tightens because you are partnered in this delivery, this practicum piece. You see that with the surgeon, if you go to him and he's a teaching surgeon, guess what? He's feeding that back all the time into the courses. And so that's how you would do that, is that in agreement with industry, is those academics would be tightly coupled. It's not just and go and do, and then we give you the certificate. It's about, and that's where the industry chairs are so important, right? Being partnered into these subjects because they have that more recent industry. Thank you.
And that's outlined in the paper once again. So, yes.
Yes, excellent presentation. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm Spencer, Air Force Airbound Development Centre. Just to add to that, I think we need to think beyond just being responsive and reactive. Now, cyber is one of those capabilities. Really, we don't know how to get ahead of the game, but you need to be teaching creativity, innovation, disruption at initiative levels. So get ahead of the game.
Yeah, look, you know, once again, that 10-year-old might have great ideas about how to fix certain things, but people aren't going to, you know, a government organisation may not listen to them because they're 10 and they hack computers and they also play with Lego and want yo-go. So.
Different, as a member of industry, one thing I appreciate is universities that have a polytechnic approach to learning, because their philosophy will be learning through different mechanisms, and a learn by doing model, which is pretty typical of a polytechnic university, will bring in students that if they have to know how to put a database in third normal form, by golly, they're going to have to do it. And so I tend to hire and encourage recruiting from polytechnic universities because those students can hit the ground running. I also, wearing another hat, fund a number of research projects at universities that are not inventing the next IPv6. I mean, there are universities that focus on research, and that's nice. I haven't hired from them. But I'm looking for the ones where they're inventing new tool suites for cybersecurity operations centers or forensics tools, things like that. So there's just kind of something for everyone, and a broad spectrum, I think, is a good way to go.
These are all good ideas, but teaching this way is not cheap or easy. No. You have to train the staff in new ways to teach and assess. You have to train the students in it. At 1 o'clock, I've got a class of ANU tech launcher students. Half the class are doing a project for a company. The other half are individual interns at companies. And keeping them all on track and under control is difficult. And handling the security issues when they're discussing what they're all doing. Last semester, one of my students said, "Oh, yeah, we're doing a security-related project, so I'm going to go on that offensive cyber warfare course that ANU's running." And I looked at the student, I thought, what country is this student from? Turned out it was Singapore, so that's okay. But that's going to be quite a considerable overhead and also a cost to the industry which would use those interns as well. And I think that's something we need to take into account. It costs a lot more to do this than an ordinary university course.
And I guess that message has to be, you know, pushed up through the university and through industry and through government as well. Like everything that I said, I don't think any of this is easy. And I think that's why you do need disruption and change, and you have to be willing to change and try. Yeah, the money thing's always going to be, it always comes down to money, really, in the end, for anything. You know, groceries, mortgage.
Yeah, so how would that market dynamic work, right? There's these chronic shortages in terms of finding the right candidates for the jobs, so there's demand there for people who are willing to do the course, both from the employer and from the individual. How does that get turned into investment? So you talk about the expensive to teach people in new ways and learn things, and that's true, right? But it's probably more expensive not to.
Well, yeah. And that's where organisations are realising that if they don't do anything, that we're going to be in trouble.
It's a pretty big political economy question. So at 5 a.m. this morning when I was writing down what's China doing, and saying how do you solve the balance between your domestic capability and the international labour market. And the thing on which the Australian government needs to make a decision pretty soon, in combination with industry and universities, is what's the balance in the delivery of Australian cybersecurity education going to be between what we deliver domestically and what we take online from overseas or from some other way from overseas. And then there's also the sub-questions within the Five Eyes community. So I've got a student from one of my programs is over at National Defence University in Washington now, doing a far better course in a far better place than we could hope to deliver here. But we can't afford to be sending mid-level officers to the United States for those courses. And the related point then is the balance between incorporation employment, between what sort of cybersecurity work you do at home domestically and how much you ship offshore. And the balance apparently in some countries is that you ship offshore the highly complex stuff to some countries. You have a mid-level who do the other stuff, and then you ship offshore the really low-level stuff. And so there's a really big question about political economy, and until the government sort of and industry combine make some choices. So do we need to invest, for example, in a national cyber range of Australian universities? The answer is probably yes, but we don't have a mechanism at the moment for that. There is a gentleman working with the UK company who worked with Data 61 to give us some equipment from a point of view of making a national cyber range. The bad news was that the entire team of people working for Data 61, when he made that decision, got the money and got the equipment, they all went to other jobs. Then CSIRO gave us the equipment, Data 61 gave us the equipment, but we don't have a mechanism for creating the national cyber range. And the national cyber range has to be networked, and networked to these capabilities overseas. If we think we can deliver cybersecurity education in Australian institutions without a very heavy population of foreign delivery, then we'd be making the same mistake as the Chinese government. Their approach is entirely dominated by sovereign capability, and that's why they'll be eternally weak in cybersecurity, because they're missing all the bits of it. Anyway, I don't want to get too... But we have to make some choices about the political economy of education for cybersecurity.
The other way to look at it, so you look at the costs, is, well, what's the actual economic benefit to cybersecurity education? So, for example, international education is worth $22 billion to the economy. That's a good thing. So if you're able to do, say, future research, if you're able to get a number or a dollar value to the benefit of cybersecurity education in Australia, in whatever way, then that goes towards proving that it is beneficial and it is a good thing. If you can say, it brings in, that cybersecurity education brings in, we'll just say $5 billion per year or whatever, depending on what it is. That's just a made up number. It shows government and institutions that there is a greater good to this, and there is a reason for investing $100 million here and getting $5 billion at the pipe. Anyone's going to make that bet. That's a good dollar value. Even Warren Buffett would say yes to that. Yeah, it's just another way of flipping it around. So, we can look at, it's so expensive, so what are we going to do? But what are the economic benefits? When the minister, Mr. Tan, puts his hand on heart and goes, this is how much the value is for education or cybersecurity in Australia. Here's the economy. This is what we're giving to the economy. It's a good story.
I think the other challenging question, particularly the research project, is the mutual respect between the industry and the academy. So the problem is we design tools and we try to, through the research, there is a bit of underpinning knowledge of the tools that we design, but then we want to test them through participants or the people in the industry. So they don't want to share their actual data. For example, we develop animation tools and we wanted to test through NAP and other places. But then we couldn't do it because they had people to collaborate with us, they could deploy with us. But then part of the problem is we can't use that. So we are testing through university students and employees and other people, but that's not realistic in this particular things. And also that's a huge challenge. But this is kind of like, I've seen a lot of things from Silicon Valley and particularly West Coast in the US, and they took brilliant job in that case. But then we need to have a bit of industry engagement in this case in order to overcome this challenge, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
Adam, I think just one point to make is that we focused before on how do you fund it and how do you make it happen at a national level, but there is also the individual, which you brought out really well. And I just emphasise that you can build apprenticeship model, right, where people will say, right, I'm going to go, or industry might say, I need 3 people with this apprenticeship over the next 2 years.
Yep.
So 3 every year. And you add up all the 3s, you get quite a significant program.
Mm.
You know, so instead of them going to Hayes Recruiting and trying to find the, did you describe them as the Superman?
Oh, the unicorn.
Yeah, the
Unicorn.
unicorn, yeah.
Unicorn
Is that you say, well, I'll split that money and I'll have 3 apprentices, thank you very much, through this program.
Yeah.
And so industry would sign up and you get enough industry collectively providing this. Knowing that you're also partnering with a university under supervision, use of the skills in that second year.
Yeah.
And some commitment that if you've got a flow, that you might not be happy with apprenticeship number 1, but you're part of the program. You can say that apprentices 1, 2 and 3 weren't great. 4, 5 and 6, we're improving the program as we go because we've fed that back through that program.
Through the program. Yeah, I know that the ATO used to do a cadetship program, so an ICT cadetship program through UC. So there'd be undergraduates that would go in fresh as an undergraduate and would work in the ATO in a low level. But at the end, they'd come out similar to a graduate role in the APS, but you'd come through the cadetship, you get paid to work, they pay for your study as well. Like I think it's a great idea. I don't know why I didn't do it. I'd have no hex. But they came through and then that program got bigger and bigger and bigger, and ATO excelled because they had all these experienced IT staff coming through who knew after 2 years exactly how the public service worked and also had that education background as well. So they were really successful, and I think they're still ongoing, but it is something that we could look at in cyber because it is so different once again, but it is something that the departments could look at as far as bringing cadets in and paying earn and learn methodology, which is always good. I'm pretty sure if we say we're going to pay you to do a degree, people will hopefully jump at it.
The public service has a still successful cadet program for universities, and then there's an apprentice equivalent for the vocational sector as well. So, like lumping with the defence and things. They're good programs. The problem is, in private industry, they will say, we want a person with 10 years experience, and they won't invest necessarily in the apprentices. They just want to get it from somewhere else. So,
No, just to counter that, in engineering, we certainly run a program. We wouldn't take anyone that's sort of in their first year of engineering, but certainly by the second year, as students are looking for their summer outplacements here, then I would think a very large percentage of the people that we take over their summer internship actually end up working for the firm once they finish their degree. And sort of further to that, those particular graduates, if anything, I would say remain with the firm for a significant period of time after that, because they were selected at sort of midway through their degree. They got that experience, and then sort of by the time they finish their degree, they're sort of at 6 or 9 months experience, and they're sort of free to come and go sort of between sort of uni holidays and that sort of works. But yeah, the retention rate of those particular graduates in engineering in the years after is phenomenally high. And I guess sort of counter to the argument that we would look at the back end, we actually think that most of the best graduates are sort of actually picked in sort of that second or third year. We're not actually waiting for someone to get to the end and come out and say, I was sort of the top of my class. Like, that should have been identified years before, and we're sort of after the person that's very keen to get out there and get hands-on experience. So, but that hasn't, in saying that, hasn't flowed across into cybersecurity yet, but it does provide us with a model to look at.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, any final questions? Well, in wrapping up, we can thank Adam for his contribution. Adam is one of the first graduates of the new Master's degree in Cybersecurity straight into diplomacy at this campus. There's another in the room. And we have a good news story here. We've tripled our our enrolments in Master's degrees in Cybersecurity here since 2015, when I was speaking to the head of the School of Engineering and Information Technology. He's only been here for years. When he arrived, there were 20 people in the Master's programs. There are now 360. I'm not sure what year he arrived, but we're doing very well. Our staff growth is enormous. But the reality that we find as we confront this issue of cybersecurity education, the purpose of a conference at the end of the year to kick off a 3-year process, and the research that Adam's done here really opens up both the need for a debate and gives some sort of sense of direction to the debate. I think Adam's framework, where you understand cybersecurity as a combination of multiple slices in that matrix, rather than a broad problem of cybersecurity education that can be addressed in fairly broad policy statements, I think is a really valuable tool. As I mentioned, the direct practical experience. And I think the sorts of choices that are ahead of the Australian government and industry is where do they want to make that slice in their new decisions on cybersecurity education. So do they want to focus on education for all of those mission sets? Child protection, critical infrastructure protection, cyber war, cyber espionage, or countering cyber crime. We can imagine that the government is doing very well in preparing the cyber espionage area. We can imagine that defence will, in the fullness of time, take care of the cyber warfare thing, and that their really specialised skills probably aren't going to be taught that much in universities. The largest single gap in Australian policy for education in cyberspace is in the countering cybercrime area. And I just encourage people to look at Adam's slice and try and understand what level of expertise we want, what's the mission set, do we want team leaders, do we want team analysts. The KSAs from the United States are very valuable, and if we can draw on international experience, all the better. Thank you for your time. This is the beginning for us of a conversation. Thank you, Adam, for putting a very good start to it.
Thank you.